The first thing I have to tell you, and please listen carefully, because this is the moment I still feel in my bones, is that I saw the paper before I heard the laughter fade around me. I remember the sound of the jazz band like a faraway ocean, the clink of crystal, and then a tiny piece of folded white that seemed to stop time. If you're watching this, please do me a favor right now. Tap the like button and subscribe so stories like mine keep coming. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how far this little tale of family and fury travels. We were in a ballroom that sparkled like it had been built to impress every person who'd ever wanted to feel important. Candles burned under glass domes, petals of white roses lay like silent applause across every table, and waiters moved with the kind of practiced grace that makes a celebration feel effortless. I sat at table 8, right beside the child who has been my heartbeat for 7 years, my grandson Leo, and at the far side Lucy, my adopted daughter, who has always been the steady hand in our house. My son Alex was flitting about, greeting friends and cousins, mascaraed with smiles and clinking glasses as though each toast was a promise he was making to himself that he could be happy again. He'd lost his first wife, Maria, and though time has a way of dulling sharpness to a dull ache, there was a kind of fragile hope in his face tonight. He wanted to believe this time could be different. I wanted him to. Leo sat with his little red toy car, pushing it along the immaculate linen like a tiny captain steering through everyone's celebration. He has his mother's lashes, and a silence that sometimes frightens me because I can still see the day he clung to me when Maria left this world. The fever night, the ambulance, the way his small body trembled. So any oddness in him pulls at me the way a loose thread pulls at a sweater. He was quiet more than usual. He took a cracker, chewed slowly, and moved his toy only with the tip of his fingers. If you've ever watched a child who's not quite himself, you know the small alerts in a parent's soul. I noticed. Lucy noticed. My son evidently didn't. Ava, my son's new bride, was all polish and pearls in a dress that shimmered like a million tiny sequins. She smiled perfectly for cameras, and there was a calm about her that could have been confidence or a carefully rehearsed mask. She was pleasant. She charmed the relatives. She laughed at the right moments. Yet something about the way she slid a chocolate bar from her purse and offered it to Leo, that practiced softness, didn't sit right with my bones. Leo didn't take it. He turned his face slightly away. I told myself to stop being suspicious. How many times does a woman at a new wedding act carefully? 1,000. But the little things, the insistence on hovering when she thought no one watched, that half-second glance that mattered too much, they started to line up like breadcrumbs, and I knew better than to follow them without an anchor. Our family, before the dark day the phone call cut everything in two, used to be simple. Maria was the kind of daughter-in-law who wraps a house with laughter even when the floors need mopping. She made small, perfect things. Sliced fruit into smiley faces for Leo, hummed while she cooked, let me steal a kiss on her cheek and call her my girl. The memory of her is the warm light I still reach for on long nights. When she died, the world rearranged itself around her absence. My son buried himself in work like a man trying to hold back the ocean with a shovel. Leo learned that the world could slip away. He learned to hold his breath until someone noticed. I became his voice at school, his soft place between doctor's visits and nightmares. Lucy came to us like a blessing, a steady hand, a laugh that could fill a room, and a love for Leo that had almost nothing to do with law and everything to do with heart. When Alex told me about Ava, I wanted to be kind. I really did. He came home one evening and said, with that shy, fumbling optimism that you learn to recognize when someone has been hurt, "Mom, I met someone." He brought her over and sat us at the kitchen table while she smiled and complimented the framed photos of Maria. She lingered on one of Leo and his mother a second too long. I smiled for the right reasons and let the worry stay small. Maybe I was being old-fashioned. Maybe I was being unreasonable. Maybe I wanted to see for him a happiness I thought had died. So we invited her in, served coffee, and pretended everything was ordinary. For a little while she fit like a glove. But life is a patient teacher. Little things add up. There were afternoons when she would take Leo out and return with his shirt dirty but his eyes empty. There were nights when she spoke sharply at him, and later, with retail sweetness, would cover it in a smile like a bandage. Once, when I stopped by to pick him up from school, His teacher pulled me aside and said softly that he had withdrawn, that he didn't paint on the easel like the other children. "Is everything okay at home?" she asked like she was offering me a rope. My heart sank in a way I didn't want to admit. Children are like glass. If you chip them, the cracks stay. Lucy would watch Ava with a face that told a story she never said out loud. Her fingers would tighten around her cup when Ava laughed and leaned in on Alex's shoulder. Lucy is protective in a quiet way. She doesn't shout. She cuts out the negative by folding it away and folding herself into the safe places. I thought she was holding back. She was holding everything back, actually, because she feared what saying anything might do to Leo's fragile world. The birthday, Leo's 7th, was supposed to be a moment to stitch back more joy. Lucy baked a chocolate cake with a smile that wore thin, and Alex lifted his boy and sang like a man trying to reclaim a song that once belonged to all of them. For an instant, the family felt whole. Ava sat off to the side, clapping as if she had come to perform her part in someone else's life. When Leo made a wish and blew out his candles, I felt something that could have been relief. Then came small mornings, an irritated voice at a grocery store, a scolding for ripping a comic, that began to scrape at me. I started noticing the way Leo flinched at a raised tone, the way he sought my eye across a room as though pleading for permission to not be hurt. So here we were, when the paper made the room feel like a different world. He pushed his car a beat too aggressively and it rolled under the table. He crawled to grab it, and then, with a suddenness that did not fit 7 years of play, his little hand drew up a scrap of paper folded into a neat square. He didn't toss it aside. He clung to me, little body pressed into my side, breath coming fast. "Grandma," he whispered, eyes wide and liquid. "Let's go. Please. Now." The voice of a child who's been taught to keep secrets is different than the voice of a child who is merely shy. This had weight. It had fear. I told myself to stay calm for him, because panic would only make his small body tremble more. I lifted the tablecloth slowly, as if whatever lived under that linen might be the thing that could still my heart. There, half hidden in shadow next to the leg of his chair, was a small paper folded into quarters. I picked it up with hands that were not steady and opened it. The candlelight hit the scribbled words and the letters punched me like cold iron. Table 8. Add shrimp to the child's serving. The sentence was ordinary and terrible all at once. Shrimp. Leo's allergy is not a small thing. A flake in a salad, an invisible crumb on a serving spoon. For him, it's danger in a bite. I felt my throat close. The hall kept breathing and singing as if nothing had shifted. But for Leo and for me, the world turned inside out. I don't remember how I stood. I remember the way Lucy's face collapsed into concern, the look of a woman who knows children like a map knows rivers. I remember clutching Leo and feeling his ribcage tremble against me. And I remember seeing Alex laughing across the room, utterly unaware, raising a glass with a coworker, having his picture taken, convinced this night would mend him. It tore me in two, watching the man who had once been so careful with our family's heart move through the crowd like a stranger at his own celebration. My legs carried me toward the bar before my brain had time to make decisions. Staff were clustered there, young men and women with aprons and clipped smiles. A waiter named David, someone who'd brought our table drinks more than once, stood with a tray. I handed him the paper like a dare. "Who gave you this?" I demanded. My voice was steadier than I felt, and that steadiness is a thing I learned during the long nights after Maria's funeral. People in crisis learn to give urgency a polite mask. He looked as if someone had punched the air from his lungs. "Ma'am," he stammered, that's my paper." I dropped it. A woman handed it to me. She said to give it to the chef. His fingers shook, and when he said the word woman, it sounded like a confession he didn't want to make. "Do you know who she is?" I pressed, my heart hammering. He shook his head, and the waiters around him began to murmur. Suddenly the party noises grew distant and tinny, like they were taking place on the other side of a glass. That's when the orchestra softened a note, and the world narrowed down to a handful of people under a ceiling of crystal. I felt rage like a physical thing, hot and blinding and almost funny in how young it made me feel, like a different lifetime, where I would have run into the kitchen and screamed and made a scene. Instead, the fear for my grandson made my steps direct. I told David, in a voice that barely contained the quake beneath, that my grandson was severely allergic. I told him a piece of shrimp could kill him. You should have seen how his face went white. He babbled apology after apology, but his I didn't know was brittle and useless. We were both trapped in a scene that could turn into tragedy on a single plate. Lucy took Leo in her arms like a protective cloak. She whispered something small to him, and he leaned into her as if she were the only shore he trusted. I told her to keep him close while I walked, as if my walking could gather answers. I threaded between guests and servers, my mind running through the small list of people who could have been near our table unnoticed. A stranger? A woman with a calm voice who moves like an unremarkable shadow? A friend of the bride? The possibility that someone had written that malicious note, knowing the stakes, turned my blood into ice. Who does that? Who would put a child at risk like that? I found the bar manager near a cluster of highboys and demanded to be taken to the kitchen. If you have ever needed to be louder than an organ, louder than your good manners, you know the sensation. A pressure building until it breaks through the polite skin. You will not serve anything to Table 8's child until I see the kitchen and the chef, I said. The man blinked, probably thinking I was a mad aunt. Perhaps I was. Anyone who protects a child with urgency is a little mad. He called for the head chef with the kind of speed that only comes when someone mentions food allergies and a grandmother's name in the same sentence. As we walked through the service corridor, the near silence of the ballroom grew to a hush. In that hallway, where trays clattered and orders were shouted under breath, the truth sat like a bead of ink, small but spreading. The chef stood with his back to the door, hands wiped, a towel slung over his shoulder like he was on parade. I thrust the paper toward him and asked where it had come from. He read it, then looked up at me as if trying to calculate whether I was crazy or serious. "This paper is mine," said one of the younger line cooks, a kid with flour on his arms. A woman dropped it when I was passing through. I didn't check it. I was told from the ticket to add shrimp to Table 8's kid dish. His voice was small, which made my anger grow big and ugly. "Who handed it to you?" I demanded again. Every second felt like a slow drip. The cook swallowed and said, I think she was wearing a pale dress. She had a small bag. I didn't get close. The manager swore softly and said they would check the CCTV. I thought of all the ways a camera might miss something. Angles, blind spots, cropped footage. I thought of all the things the world lets slide because it is busy with celebration. Then, while the man buzzed into his headset to pull footage, a new movement sliced across the corridor's edge. The kitchen door opened slowly on a soundless hinge. Someone stood there, half hidden in the doorway, and for a heartbeat I thought it might be a server bringing me an answer. My chest lodged with a kind of cold I haven't had since I held Maria's hands and watched her smile fade. I couldn't tell who it was at first, just a silhouette and the sense that the moment had been set, like a play's final scene. I stepped forward, every muscle taut. "Ma'am," called the manager, unsure. The person in the doorway shifted. I took another step. My heart pounded in a rhythm like an old machine trying to start. And then, with the world pressing in on both sides of me, the figure moved into the light and I saw them. But not all of them. Only enough to make my breath stop. They were neither a guest nor a server at first glance. A woman, certainly. Not Ava, I told myself, but I couldn't be sure. She lifted a hand to her face as if to smooth something, or maybe cover her guilt. The kitchen's bright, steaming heat painted her in an unforgiving light. I opened my mouth to speak, to demand names, to pull the truth out of her like a splinter. But the corridor was suddenly full of noise again. A shouted question from the manager, the distant clink of crystal, the orchestra's tempo picking back up. Lucy's whisper at my ear, "Grandma, please be careful," was small and steady and terrible. The woman in the doorway began to back away, her heel catching on the threshold. And someone, whether intentionally or not, closed the kitchen door as if sealing us out from the last fragment of safety. I stood there, the paper still in my pocket, the image of the scribbled words burned behind my eyes, and the knowledge that somebody had tried to put my grandson in harm's way, sitting like a hot coal under my ribs. My legs were lead. I felt like I could either collapse or move in a straight line to take down the name of whoever had done this. But before I could make that decision, Before I could step back into the ballroom and raise my voice in a way that would have people look and listen, the manager turned to me and said quietly, "The footage won't show the handoff. There's a blind spot at that angle." It was a professional phrase for the simplest kind of cowardice. Someone had done this where the cameras wouldn't see, and now we were meant to swallow that fact. That should have been the end of my motion, the end of my search. If there is a thing that older women learn, it is how to hold grief and how to keep the world together for children who cannot hold their own. But love is a cruel companion. It will not let you be small when your child is in danger. I felt a heat in my chest that blurred everything else. I walked back toward the ballroom, toward my son who still laughed under the chandeliers, toward Leo who was safe for the moment with Lucy at his side. I needed answers. I needed to know who had written that sentence with the coolness of a person crossing a road, who had planned the possibility of harm as if it were a joke. I had to do more than ask. I had to act. And so I took a breath that tasted like winter and moved. But before I could reach the table, before I could speak to Alex or pull the bride's arm to look into her eyes, a woman's hand, small, gloved, and deliberately composed, slipped across the reception line toward someone else's tray. She wore the same pale dress the line cook had described. For a flash, our eyes met. She smiled in a way that made the world tilt and cold spread through me like ink. Her smile said nothing and everything at once. Then she turned and walked away through the crowd, a ribbon of calm in a room made of noise. I started after her. My heart told me to run. My mind told me to be smart. I threaded through bodies, past balloons, around a table of relatives who hadn't noticed the small storm brewing at our corner. The woman was moving with a quiet, purposeful gait, sliding toward the exit like someone who had practiced leaving a room and getting away with it. People blocked me. A photographer stepped between us to catch some staged moment of the groom. A server bumped my elbow with a tray. By the time I reached the doorway where she had vanished, she was gone. And in the doorway, a small scrap of paper fluttered as if to mock me, and my hand closed on it without thinking. It was folded in the same way, but this time it held nothing but crumbs of confetti and a faint scent of perfume. No name, no handwriting to trace. The room resumed its cheer as if nothing had happened, as if a child's safety could be treated like an atmospheric hiccup. I stood on the threshold, paper in one hand, rage and fear in my chest, and I realized something that made the bile rise in my throat. Whoever wanted shrimp served to a child at table 8 had not cared whether they were serving my grandson or any other child. They wanted to sow harm. They had chosen a day when hearts were open and people were distracted. I folded my fingers around the scrap until it crinkled, and I made a choice then. I would not be anything but deliberate. I would not be a loud aunt causing a scene for no reason. I would be a woman who found the small threads and pulled them until the truth unraveled. I would not let my grandson's life, or any child's life, be used like a footnote in someone else's plan. So I walked back to the table with my shoulders squared, my granddaughter tight under one arm, and my eyes fixed on my son. I would speak to him softly at first. I would tell him and give him a chance to act like the father I knew he could be. If he failed, I would go further. I would speak to the staff, go through the footage, interview people, and if silence remained the only answer, I would take the fight to wherever it needed to go. But as I sat, as I looked at Alex smiling and preparing to kiss his new wife while the band swelled, I felt the room tilt again. From somewhere in the hall came the soft, decisive sound of someone clearing their throat, a sound that carries weight in any language. And from where the bridesmaids stood, a voice rose, low and almost polite, saying words I was not yet ready to hear, but that would change everything. "Mrs. Williams, may I have a word?" The moment I heard my name, Mrs. Williams, spoken in that tone, I felt something cold climb my spine. No one calls me that anymore, not in this family. To most, I'm just Grandma or Clara. My husband's name left with him years ago, and yet here was a stranger's voice, smooth as glass, using it like a secret key. I turned, my hand tightening around Leo's shoulder, and found a young woman in a slate blue dress standing among the bridesmaids, though I knew she wasn't one of them. She didn't wear their same flowers, their same practiced smile. She wore a mask of courtesy, with eyes that seemed older than her years. "If you'll allow me," she said again, inclining her head toward the hallway. Every nerve in me screamed not to move. My grandson's small hand gripped my sleeve and Lucy leaned in, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. "Don't go." But the woman's composure was such that walking away would have made a scene, and scenes at weddings live forever in gossip. So I rose slowly, patting Leo's cheek as if I were just stretching my legs, and followed her through the archway out of the ballroom. The hallway was cooler, quieter. The music became a distant hum. She stopped beneath a sconce, folded her arms with the ease of someone who'd rehearsed, and looked me straight in the eye. "I don't mean to frighten you," she began, "but there are things you need to know about Ava." At that name, Ava, my new daughter-in-law, the bride whose smile had charmed half the room, my heart dropped. I kept my voice steady. "Who are you?" "My name doesn't matter," she said quickly, glancing around as though the walls might listen. "But I worked with her before. At a firm downtown. She isn't who she claims to be. And if you love that boy," she gestured back toward the ballroom, toward where Leo sat, "then you should start asking questions tonight." The air thickened. My throat felt tight. I wanted to demand proof, details, anything. But before I could speak, she pressed something into my hand. Another folded scrap of paper, smaller this time, with handwriting sharp and slanted. "Keep this safe," she whispered. "Don't open it here. Don't let her see you." Then, without another word, she slipped away, her heels clicking softly until she vanished into the crowd. I stood alone, the note burning against my palm, wondering if I'd just stumbled into some stranger's madness or the first thread of a truth that could shatter us. When I returned to the table, Lucy looked at me with questions written all over her face. I shook my head subtly, tucking the note deep into my purse. Leo leaned against me, quieter than ever, his toy car forgotten. Across the room, Alex had his arms around Ava, laughing as if joy were finally his again. My heart ached. For him, for Leo, for the fragile dream of a family whole. Dinner was served. I refused to let a single bite touch Leo's plate without checking it myself, watching every server's hands, every dish that passed. I smiled when anyone looked my way, but inside I was unraveling. When Leo's plate arrived, I leaned down and sniffed, scanned, even touched the edge with a fork. No shrimp, just chicken, mashed potatoes, and peas. Relief came sharp and fleeting. "Grandma," Leo whispered, tugging at my sleeve again. His eyes darted toward the head table. "She doesn't like me." His voice was so small it nearly broke me. "Who, sweetheart?" I asked, though I already knew. He tilted his chin toward Ava. She was raising her glass with Alex, that perfect, practiced smile plastered on. I pressed a kiss to his forehead. "You're loved more than you can ever imagine," I told him, though the words tasted like hope more than certainty. The evening dragged on with speeches, dances, laughter that rang hollow in my ears. My purse felt like a weight on my lap, the hidden note inside pulsing like a heartbeat. Finally, when the music swelled and all eyes turned to the dance floor, I slipped it out and carefully unfolded it beneath the tablecloth. The handwriting was unmistakably the same as the shrimp note. Sharp, slanted, deliberate. But this one was longer. Watch the bride closely. She has secrets you don't see. Tonight is not what it seems. My hands trembled. Lucy's eyes caught mine, sharp as a hawk's, and I passed her the paper under the table. She read it, her jaw tightening. "What do we do?" She mouthed, "I didn't know." For the first time in years, I truly didn't know. The first dance began. Alex and Ava moving together beneath the chandeliers, their smiles broadcast across the room. Guests clapped, snapped pictures, wiped tears, and yet I couldn't look away from Ava's eyes. Not the smile, not the dress, but the eyes that flicked once, briefly toward me. It wasn't the look of a bride basking in joy. It was the look of someone taking measure, as if she knew exactly what I held in my purse. That was when the lights flickered. Just a brief hiccup, but enough to send murmurs through the room. Enough to make Leo bury his face in my arm. And in that fleeting darkness before the lights steadied again, I could have sworn I saw a shadow slip out the side door, the same slate blue dress as the mysterious woman from the hallway. I rose, heart pounding, ready to chase. But Lucy caught my wrist. "Grandma, wait," she hissed. "Don't go alone," so I sat. For the moment. My grandson safe beside me, my son blissfully ignorant on the dance floor, my daughter-in-law twirling like a queen. And in my purse, the note that promised nothing would ever be the same. I didn't tell Alex about the note under Leo's pillow. How could I? He would have laughed, or worse, he would have turned it back on me, accusing me of trying to poison his new marriage. No, this was between me and Lucy, and whoever had dared to step into my grandson's room while he slept. Lucy read the note 3 times, her face pale. "Grandma, someone was in this house." "I know," I whispered, clutching my coffee mug so hard it burned my hand. "Which means they have keys, or they know how to slip past locks. Either way, they were close enough to touch Leo. That's what chills me." Leo, oblivious, hummed to himself at the table, drawing little cars on a scrap of paper. Every line of his small body screamed innocence, safety, and yet the shadow in this house was tightening around him. "We need to find out who's behind this," Lucy said firmly. "No more waiting." So we started with Ava. That afternoon, while Alex was at work, Ava announced she was going shopping with a friend. Lucy offered to watch Leo, and I volunteered to drive Ava into town, under the guise of wanting to bond with her. She agreed, her smile smooth as glass. The ride was quiet, but my eyes were sharp. "So," I began, "tell me about your family. I realized last night I don't know much about them." Her hands tightened on her purse. "There isn't much to tell. My parents passed when I was young. I was raised by an aunt in Chicago." "Is that so? And does your aunt know about the wedding?" "Of course," Ava said quickly. "But she's very ill. Couldn't travel." I let the silence stretch, then said lightly, "Strange that Alex hasn't met her." For a second her lips parted, like a crack in the mask. But she recovered. "Not everyone is close to their family, Clara. Surely you understand that." I smiled faintly. "Yes, but family has a way of leaving footprints, Ava. They're never truly gone." Her eyes flicked toward me, cold as steel. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "Nothing at all," I said. But inside my pulse was hammering. She was hiding something. I could feel it in my bones. When I dropped her off at the boutique, I waited until she disappeared inside, then followed her at a distance. She wasn't shopping. She wasn't even browsing. She walked straight through the boutique, out the back door, and into a narrow alley where a dark sedan was waiting. I ducked behind a dumpster as she climbed into the passenger seat. The driver's window rolled down just enough for me to catch a glimpse of a man's profile. Sharp jaw, graying hair. Ava leaned close, speaking urgently, her hands moving fast. I couldn't hear them, but I didn't need to. The way she glanced around, the way her body coiled with secrecy, it was all I needed to know. I snapped a picture with my phone, heart racing, then slipped back before she could see me. That night, I showed Lucy. She stared at the photo. "That's not a friend. That's something else." "Who is he?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I intend to find out." The next day, I visited an old friend, Martha, who worked at the town hall. If anyone knew how to dig into records quietly, it was her. I brought cookies, made small talk, and then slid Ava's name across the counter. Martha frowned. "Ava Monroe?" "Yes," I said, heart pounding. She tapped at her computer, her brows knitting. "Well, there's a problem. There isn't much here. No birth certificate under that name. No marriage license filed here either." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "They just got married." "Oh, the ceremony was real enough," Martha said. "But the paperwork? If it exists, it's not in this county. Not under Monroe, anyway." I left the town hall with my heart in my throat. Back home, Lucy was waiting. When I told her, she pressed her hands over her mouth. "She isn't who she says she is." "No," I said grimly. "And if she lied about her name, what else has she lied about?" That evening, the house was restless. Alex was humming to himself in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with all the cheer of a man in love. Ava sat nearby, sipping wine, her smile tight. I watched her, every nerve alive. When Leo wandered in, clutching his toy car, she reached for him, pulling him into her lap. My gut clenched. He squirmed, uncomfortable, but she held him close, stroking his hair. "Don't you worry about him," she said suddenly, looking straight at me. "He's safe with me." The words landed like a threat. My spoon clattered against the bowl. Lucy shot me a warning glance, but my hands were trembling. That night, I locked Leo's bedroom door from the inside and slept in a chair beside his bed. Every creak of the house set my teeth on edge. At 3 a.m, I woke to the faint sound of footsteps in the hall. Slow, careful. I held my breath, clutching the handle of the chair like a weapon. The footsteps stopped outside the door. A pause. Then, softly, something slid under the crack. I waited until the footsteps retreated before I dared move. My hand shook as I picked up the folded paper. It read, "She's not the only one you should fear." My vision blurred. The notes weren't just about Ava. Someone else was in this. Someone close, but who? I pressed the note to my chest, heart pounding. Tomorrow I would confront Ava again. Tomorrow I would demand the truth. But tomorrow brought something worse. Because when I woke, Leo was gone. His bed was empty. The window open, the curtains fluttering in the dawn breeze, and on the pillow, in that same sharp, slanted hand, lay a single line. "If you want him back, stay silent." I have lived through wars, through funerals, through nights when grief sat heavy on my chest like a stone, but nothing compared to the terror of that morning. My grandson's bed was empty, the sheets still warm, his toy car abandoned on the rug. I called his name until my throat was raw, but the house gave no answer. Lucy stumbled into the room, her face white. "Where is he?" I held up the note with shaking hands. "If you want him back, stay silent." Her knees buckled. No, Grandma. "We can't panic," I whispered, though my insides were unraveling. "We need to think." But my thoughts were a storm. Who had taken him? Ava? The man in the sedan? Someone else entirely? Downstairs, Alex was pouring coffee, humming. When he saw our faces, the color drained from his. What happened? I couldn't keep it from him anymore. "Leo is gone. Someone took him." He staggered back, the mug shattering on the floor. No, that's not possible." "It is," I snapped, my voice breaking. "Because you brought a stranger into this house, Alex. A stranger who has lied about who she is." He turned on me, eyes blazing. "Don't you dare blame Ava." But before I could answer, Ava herself walked into the kitchen, robe tied neatly, hair perfectly brushed. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice calm. Too calm. "Where is he?" I demanded. "Where is my grandson?" She blinked. "Leo? Isn't he in bed?" "Don't play games," Lucy hissed. For a flicker of a moment, Ava's mask cracked. Her eyes darted, her hands clenched. Then she smiled again. "You think I'd harm Leo? He's family now." "You're not family," I spat. "Not until you tell us the truth." The room was charged. Alex torn between us, Lucy trembling with rage. Then Ava sighed, almost bored. "Fine, if you want the truth, come with me." We followed her, out of the house, into her car. My heart screamed against it. What if this was a trap? But what choice did I have? Leo was gone. She drove us across town, down roads I hadn't traveled in years, until we reached the abandoned rail yard on the edge of the city. Rusted trains sat like skeletons, graffiti staining their sides. There, parked behind a warehouse, was the dark sedan. My breath hitched. The man stepped out, the same one I'd seen in the alley. Up close, his features were sharper, harder. He looked at Ava with disdain. "You brought them?" "They wouldn't stop," Ava said coolly. "Better they hear it than keep sniffing around." "Where's Leo?" I demanded. My voice cracked like a whip. The man gestured to the warehouse. "Safe, for now." Lucy lunged forward, but I grabbed her arm. We couldn't act rashly. Inside the warehouse, the air was damp and cold. And there, on an old sofa, clutching his toy car, sat Leo. His eyes lit up when he saw me. "Grandma!" I rushed to him, gathering him into my arms, my body shaking with relief. He was safe. He was whole, But the man's voice cut through my joy. Enough, you wanted answers? Here they are. His name, we learned, was Daniel, and Ava. Ava wasn't who she claimed. She hadn't been raised by an aunt. She hadn't lost her family. She had run from them. Daniel was her brother. And the reason they were here? Money, Alex has it, Daniel said coldly. And she married him to secure it. But then you, he jabbed a finger at me, started digging, and we couldn't risk you ruining everything. Ava's face was pale but defiant. I told you I could handle it, she hissed at him. By letting the old woman sniff around? By leaving notes like a child? My stomach dropped. The notes. They were from you? Daniel smirked. Some of them. Enough to scare you, to keep you off balance. But clearly it didn't work. Leo whimpered against me. I stroked his hair. Why involve him? I whispered. Daniel shrugged. Leverage, insurance. You'd do anything to protect him, wouldn't you? Rage surged in me, hotter than I thought I could still feel at my age. You'll regret ever laying a hand on my grandson. For the first time, Ava looked shaken. Her gaze flicked to Leo, then back to me. And I saw it, the faintest flicker of doubt in her eyes. Daniel, she said softly, this has gone too far. He rounded on her. Don't get soft now. You know why we're doing this. You swore. I didn't swear to hurt a child. Her voice trembled. The tension cracked wide open. Lucy stepped forward, her voice steady. You don't have to go with him, Ava. You can stop this. For a moment, silence. Then Ava straightened. She turned to Daniel. I'm done, he froze. What did you say? I said I'm done. I won't ruin another family. Not again. The words hung heavy, and then everything exploded. Daniel lunged, grabbing Ava's arm, but she twisted free. Alex, God bless him, finally moved, throwing himself at Daniel, the two men crashing to the floor. The struggle was fierce, brutal, years of anger and desperation colliding in one violent moment. I clutched Leo close, shielding his eyes, praying, begging. Finally, with Lucy's help, Alex pinned Daniel. His face was bloodied, his breath ragged. It's over, Alex spat. Ava stood frozen, tears streaking her perfect face. I never wanted it like this, she whispered. The police came. Statements were taken. Daniel was dragged away in cuffs, cursing us all, and Ava was given a choice. She stood outside the warehouse, trembling, staring at Alex. I lied, she admitted. About everything. But I swear I never wanted to hurt Leo. I thought I could build something real here, but Daniel, he always pulled me back. Alex's face was carved from stone. You made your choice when you lied to me. We're done, Ava. She crumpled, sobbing as they led her away too. Back home, the house was silent. Leo curled against me on the couch, already drifting into sleep, safe at last. Lucy sat nearby, her hand in mine. Alex paced, broken, muttering about betrayal, about foolishness. But I watched him, and I knew this night would change him. He would see more clearly now. He would be a father first, a dreamer second. I kissed Leo's forehead, tears slipping down my cheeks. You're safe, my darling, I whispered. No one will ever take you from me again. Outside, the dawn broke. Light spilled through the windows, chasing the shadows from every corner. And though my heart was battered, though trust had been shattered, I felt something stir inside me. A lesson, hard but true. Families are built not on paper or ceremonies, but on truth, on love, on the courage to protect one another. And as long as I drew breath, Leo would have all three.